I graduated in 1988 with a degree in graphics, and I decided to go freelance from day one against all the advice I was given by my tutors who said it wasn't possible. And they were pretty much right, you know, because back then, it's not like it is nowadays where everybody's a graphic designer because they've got a laptop. Back then, the equipment required to do the job cost 150 grand. You know, that's why all big agencies ruled the roost, really. I didn't have any contacts or anything, but off I went to London and I was going to change the world, and it didn't really happen. And I'd sort of realised the reason I wasn't getting any work was because I was just this young one-man band, fresh-faced student straight out of college with no track record or no experience or no nothing. So I kind of came up with the moniker of Microdot to try and put across the impression that I was actually an agency, you know, with all this equipment, and that didn't work either. So there was actually a 2-year period before Microdot was established, in other words, when I came up with the name. And in which time I did the Ruthless Rap Assassin stuff, because before the album, the first album I did, there was a couple of singles. So that was late 80s. So that's when the career began. So what I was doing from 90 until 93 when I first started working with them, because I was working with them before they put a record out, obviously, because we had to do the logo and what have you, which we did in 93. Well, the first part of that, I was starving, really, because I just wasn't getting any work. But I just refused to give in. I did not have a plan B. There was no plan B. I couldn't do it, you know. It's like, this is what I was going to do, and off I went. I mean, I did actually try. I got a job in the printers in London for a wee while. But I lasted a week, and I didn't even go back for my wages. That's how much I hated it. And do you know what? The thing was, it wasn't that I was like, oh, this is beneath me. I want to design record sleeves. I knew that I was going in to get some experience in the industry. But the reason I sacked it off, and I never had a job again since then, was because of the toxic atmosphere in the workplace. I was surrounded by people who hated going to work, and as a result of which they hated each other. It was just a very bad vibe, you know what I mean? And I thought, this is just the antithesis of what I was setting out to do. So I left there. So struggling along, the first lucky break, really, I suppose, was meeting Richard Ashcroft. And I met Richard Ashcroft at a party in Wigan when he was 17. This is way before the Verve kicked off. This would have been 1990, I think. And he was fascinated. It was my ex-girlfriend's party. So this was in the days before the internet, when you used to take records to a party to play music. So some of the records that were there were the ones that I designed the sleeves for, i.e. Rap Assassins and Kiss AMC, the Another Sister Act. And he found it fascinating that a young lad had set out to design record sleeves because, as he put it, all lads wanted to be footballers, rock stars or DJs. But you wanted to be a record sleeve designer. Wow, that's weird. So we had the crack. And I didn't see him again for 2 years, and I bumped into him purely by chance. I mean, my life is littered with these almost like sent from God chance happenings that changed the rest of my life. And this was one of them. I went to a petrol station. We'd been up all night and I wanted a cup of tea, and we had no milk in the flat. So I went to a petrol station to get some milk, and they didn't have any milk. But I bumped into, on the forecourt, this gangly guy got out of his car, and he's like, "You're the record sleeve designer." This was 2 years after. I only met him for half an hour at a party. I said, yeah, that's that student guy that was in this band. He goes, "Yeah, we've just been signed, and if you want to do the artwork, you've got the gig." And that's how I got to work with the Verve. And what happened was, I was then told to contact their manager, who I imagined this sort of big Harvey Goldstein sort of character, but it transpires it was just their mate who they went to sixth form college with, who I'm still mates with now. I was at a wedding with him the other week, actually. So I spoke to him about it, and he's like, "Oh, I know nothing about this. You better contact the record company in London." So I did, and they were horrified because it was Virgin Records, albeit under the moniker Hut to make it look like a small indie, but it wasn't, it was Virgin. And this was in the days when record companies used to spend a fortune on bands. And before they've even put a record out, they're hundreds of grand into it with the advance and the buying them equipment and studio time. You couldn't record it on a laptop back then, you know. So they're horrified that there's some guy that Richard has met at a party in Wigan who's got no track record, who doesn't know what he's doing. He wants him to do the artwork when they've got some big London agency lined up to do it. But they agreed to meet me, and the first single was All in the Mind. And I'd done a sketch, what I was, my ideas, because I'd never had a job. I knew nothing about presentation techniques. So I went into this meeting in London at Virgin Records. And I go in this boardroom and they're all sat there, all the marketing department, and they're not happy about this in the first place, right? You know. So then I said, "Come on then, Brian, let's see the ideas." And I literally pulled out this piece of paper. I've got a photo. I've got it framed up in my studio actually, and it's about that big, and it's just this incomprehensible thumbnail sketch. And they're all like, "Ah, yeah, very funny. Where's the presentation?" I'm like, "No, that's it." So they all shook their heads. But I went away and did it, and you know, after that, I never got any grief off them after that because they knew we could do the job just because we'd never done it. Because that's the point, actually. I'd never done it before. How I knew I was going to do this, I don't know. You know, I just had this blind belief. So I started working with the Verve, and then I got this office in Manchester in this dungeon, effectively, for 25 quid a week. I had no windows in it. And it was the cheapest room I could get. And I didn't have a computer either. I've got a picture again, and in this room there was an old architect's drawing board, you know, with the thing that you move up and down to draw lines on, a photocopier, and a deck chair from IKEA. That was it. That was the studio equipment. And it was in that building that the Inspiral Carpets had an office, for whom Noel Gallagher worked as a roadie. And I got chatting to him in a lift one day because I had these trainers on, which you couldn't get in England. I took my mum to Rome for her 60th birthday to see the Pope, right? And she was made up, you know. It was a fantastic trip as it goes. And whilst so, we had a day trip to Florence to go to the Uffizi Gallery. And whilst in Florence, I saw these trainers that you couldn't get over here. So I bought them. And when I'm in this lift in Manchester wearing these trainers, and this guy gets in who I had never met before, and I didn't know who he was, obviously, because he weren't famous or anything. And the first thing he ever said to me was, "All right, put my hands up. Where the F did you get them trainers from?" And that's how I met Noel Gallagher. So another pure chance meeting. Then we get chatting, "What do you do?" "Oh, I'm starting designing record sleeves. I've only just set out and just done some for a band from Wigan called Verve." Because I've seen them, they're good, yeah. When we get signed, not if, when we get signed, I'd like you to do ours. That's how that started. So that's how it all came about. And then it took off from there, really. It was almost exclusively, in both cases, Richard I'd worked with in the Verve and Noel with Oasis, never the rest of them. Every band I worked with was different. Like with SUEDE, for example, Brett Anderson, I just became a technician, just realising what he wanted, you know what I mean? But with Oasis, sometimes Noel would have very specific ideas, like for some might say he wanted all the words for the song in one go, in one sleeve. Other times he just let me do whatever I wanted. Same with Richard, you know, some was very specific, other times it was, "I don't know this time, Brian, you do it," you know. When we did the sleeve for This Is Music, you've got to bear in mind, back then, everything was shot on film. And whilst that doesn't really affect the outcome, I know the purists would argue that, "Oh, you have got to shoot on film, there's a different vibe to it." Yeah, if you blow it up the size of a bus and you get a magnifying glass on, you can tell the difference, but I'm digital all the way now. But back then, we had no choice. It was shot on film because that's all we had. And the difference is, if you're shooting it on film, you do not see what you've got until at least the next day. Right? So we would have to, all photographers did back then, you could take Polaroids, but even, you know, to give you an idea what the exposure was like or the composition, but it would not accurately represent what the film stock would look like. So whilst you had a guide to it, what photographers would tend to do, they would employ a system called bracketing, which means, you know, you'd expose a wee bit over either side just to make sure you've got it right. And you'd shoot shitloads of film, basically, just to make sure you got it, because you couldn't be doing, especially if you're working with a band like Oasis and the following day they'd be off to Denmark or something. You know, you couldn't say, "Oh, you've got to come back, we got it wrong." So we would shoot tons and tons of film, whereas that shoot for This Is Music, it was cold, it was raining, and it's as grim as it looks that day of that shot. And Richard just said, "I'll give you 20 minutes and that's it." So that was one of the fastest shoots of all time. But, you know, it is effectively a still life, isn't it? It's not like it's an action shot. You've got to keep going just to make sure you've got the shot of this or that happening. It's a still life. Here's one for you as well. That text is not photoshopped on. That's on that board. It looks like it's been added later. It's not. He's walking up and down that street with that board on him. And so that was that. I'll tell you what's my favourite bit of that sleeve. That's 95 that was done, which was obviously prior to Oasis, Verve becoming massive and them all getting minted. And if you look at his cuffs are all frayed on his jacket. Next time you look at that picture, you'll see it. He's got, and that wasn't, he was trying to be some sort of like Coldplay kind of guy wearing rags when he's actually a millionaire. That was it. He was skint and his clothes were falling to bits, basically. And, I love that little touch. I just wanted everything to be the best it possibly could have been at that given time, bearing in mind the time, the budget. Do you know what I mean? And I still work like that today. Everything's got to be done as good. Even when we're packing stuff at work, we pack it as best we can. This is Microdot. This is us. This is my life. My name is on all of this. It's got to be the best it possibly can. And that was always the... and that's why they're so good. That's, I'm blowing my own trumpet there, but they are. That body of work is beyond compare because I really went the extra mile. And here's another point that the other design agencies at that time didn't do. They would put a clock on it. In other words, they would have a budget of 500, 1,000, 2,000 pounds, and they would think, well, we charge £50 an hour, so this job's got 40 hours, say. You know what I mean? Well, I didn't. It's like, what's the budget? Right, okay, nice one. If it took me 6 months or 3 weeks, we'd keep going until it was done properly, regardless of Verve's first album. I probably ended up getting about 50 pence an hour for doing that because it took us months to do, and we didn't get any more money for that either. I'm a massive Beatles fan as well, and before anybody starts freaking out, I am not in any way, shape or form comparing Oasis as a band to the Beatles as a band, because clearly the Beatles are the best band of all time, and it's not musical or creative, but in terms of a phenomenon, it's the closest thing you're going to get to it, I think, especially these days when they're getting bigger than ever. And what I'm trying to get at is, in America, the Beatles had 20 odd albums. In the UK, they had 13 albums. Only the same amount of songs. The Americans butchered them up. That's what the butcher sleeve was all about, or partly, you know what I mean? That they were sick and tired of this money machine just cutting everything up. So if you look at the UK output, that for me is the definitive version of the Oasis phenomenon. The records, the posters, the sleeves, what happened on Creation Records in the 90s, that's the definitive account. So what happened in Burma, I had no control over it. It might look rubbish. It was nothing to do with us. That's just what they were that big. We couldn't control everything, So I think we did a pretty good job controlling everything that was in the UK, though, because, I made it, again, we'd do stuff that we weren't even getting paid for just to make sure it was right. The little thing, well, there's no budget for that. I don't care. It's got to be done right. We'll do it, He'd been mithering me to go watch him for ages, and I kept putting it off because I liked Noel, and we got on, and I thought, they're bound to be rubbish, right? Because all your mates' bands are always shit, right? Aren't they? I mean, most bands are rubbish. How often do you come across a good band? There's only one every 10 years anyway. So what's the odds of this guy who I met in a lift, his band being any good? So I finally went along to see him. It was the Hop and Grape Bar in Manchester, and they were supporting Dodgy. And I got there late, and I missed half the set. But and there was 3 people at the gig. Literally, there was me, Marcus Russell, who was the manager, Johnny Marr, and I think a student, and the girl behind the bar, and that was it. I'm not exaggerating either. That was it. And I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I was literally like, Jesus Christ. Like a juggernaut come through the wall and hit me. I was genuinely speechless, taken aback. Couldn't believe it. Had they not been seen here, who knows what would have happened? And it's not like, well, they would have been picked up by somebody. Not necessarily. Factory turned them down. Tony Wilson had the chance and he said no. And I think, well, it's everything, isn't it? Because like Noel said, we knew we were brilliant and we knew we could make it, but you've got to be given the opportunity to be put in front of people. And that's what McGee did, didn't it? Because he just let them do what they wanted, effectively. That was one of the great things with working with Creation. I never had to run anything by the label. It's just, if Noel okayed it, that was it. Me and Noel worked it out. So who knows what would have happened? It's like, but knowing what we do know, I think King Tut's it's cemented in folklore, isn't it? It's where it began. And the fact that they weren't even on the bill that night, that makes it even more special. And, there's all sorts of, I've heard rumours that it was I think it was in Tom English book, doesn't he? He got some conspiracy theory that it's all a setup and it never happened. Well, I'll blow that one out of the water straight away. Because I spoke to Tony McCowell about this, right? And Tony McCowell owes Noel Gallagher no favours, right? So if it was a myth cooked up by Noel, Tony would be the first one to say, here we are. And Tony said, no, that's what happened. So I don't know where he's coming from with that one. You know, I mean, I don't get the conspiracy either. An unknown band gets discovered in a nightclub in Glasgow. All right then, but what's the alternative? The unknown band gets discovered somewhere else. It don't make any sense, does it? So as far as I'm aware, that's what happened. The Oasis logo, which I designed, everybody. I've done a full-blown YouTube video on it, which is a deep dive on it all. But in a nutshell, it came by accident. I had a meeting with the band. The first time I met them all as a band, I'd met Liam and Noel before, because we weren't actually mates before all this. There's another myth that I wasn't one of the mates. You know, we became mates as a result of working together. The first time I met them all as a band, because I didn't know the dynamic then, I didn't know that it was Noel that made all the decisions. I went along thinking, like, you know, it's a democratic process. Like the Super Furry Animals, for example, they're the only truly democratic band I've ever met where all of them have to agree on it, which is amazing. But anyway, so I went along to Sheffield and they were supporting the BMX Bandits, and I took with me some books on classic record sleeves, which is something I never normally do because I never refer to other sleeves when doing sleeves, because you just end up being derivative then, don't you? A lot of my stuff's based on fine art paintings. But I took this book along just to see what they did and didn't like. And in that book, there was the Rolling Stones' second album, which if you look at it today, is so far ahead of its time. It's 1964. There's no tech. It doesn't say the Rolling Stones on it. And it doesn't say anything on it other than the Decca logo records, the Decca Records logo in the corner. And I just thought, wow, that looks amazing. So it's based on that, not a rip-off of the Decca logo per se, but the positioning and the style, the fact there was no telts on it. That's where I got the idea from. Like I said, there's the details, the full detail of it is in the video on my channel. But what I will say, what that then gave me was the freedom to do anything on the sleeve, and it was automatically recognisable as an Oasis product. And by that I mean it's like a McDonald's style branding, which I'd never seen done before in any band. And it works. If you ever look on YouTube now, anybody who's done a video on that little logo is always in the corner of the thumbnail. You know what I mean? I established that style. And what that does do is, if you look at other bands, and I hate this, where they do like, say for example, there's a picture of a Cadillac on the album sleeve. All the singles off of it will have a section of the Cadillac. I think it's dead lazy and unimaginative. We never did that. Everyone was a bespoke suit, if you like, you know. But what that meant was with this branding, I could have a picture of an open moorland or a picture of a party in a hotel room, and just by tacking that in the corner, automatically, instantly recognised. So rather than narrowing your creative possibilities by going down that themed route, it widened them up. We could put anything we wanted on the sleeve and it was automatically recognisable. I never did any Oasis videos because I wasn't given the opportunity, because I'd never done them before. It's that old chestnut, isn't it? You know, where do you get started then? And I always thought that a video should be the sleeve coming to life, especially our sleeves, which are visual narratives. You know, they're all photographically based and they're all telling a story. They lend themselves perfectly to videos, which is how I got the job to do the videos for the Super Furries in the first place, because McGee saw that would work. And it was him that got it. Not the band didn't know who I was. I mean, I remember the first time I saw them, it was the Kentish Town Forum Club, and Alan asked me, did I want to get into video? I said, yeah, I'd love to. I've got this new band, the Super Furry Animals. I thought, oh God, they're going to be rubbish with a name like that. I mean, they're one of my favourite bands to this day, and they're amazing. And we ended up going to Colombia shooting a video in the mid-90s. I mean, Colombia as in South America, that Colombia, you know. Pablo Escobar had just been killed. It was the most dangerous country in the world at the time, and we flew in to make a pop video. It was amazing. And the inspiration wasn't other record sleeves, it was fine art paintings. That style there, which is little visual metaphors dotted around the place, was nicked directly from I often cite a picture called the Arnold Feeney Wedding by a guy called Jan van Eyck, which was done in something crazy like 1500 or might have even been 1400 odd, 500 years ago. And he was part of the Flemish Renaissance movement, and all those paintings from that time, and the Italian Renaissance paintings as well, would always be a narrative. They'd be telling a story, because people, no printing then, let alone television, or certainly not the internet, obviously. So people would decorate their homes with one-off pieces of art, and the wealthier you were, for example, I think this is interesting. The really wealthy merchants who had commission paint would have loads of blue in the paint because blue was the most costly pigment to create. So they were showing off the wealth by having. Anyway, so all these paintings were commissioned. They told stories in people's houses, and obviously that tradition carried on to not just the big painters, but that's how people decorated their houses back then. And that narrative style is where I got that idea from. So again, it's not related to any record sleeves or anything to do with rock and roll, really. It's all coming from, well, you could argue, I suppose, that there's a rock and roll before rock and roll was invented in terms of painting that was done 500 years ago. People always go on about Oasis sounding like the Beatles, and I never got that because I don't think they do. I mean, later on, perhaps some of them did. But back then, that album is Nevermind the Bollocks. It's Noel's version of Nevermind the Bollocks, and he'll tell you that himself. You know, I think I saw some articles, and there was like a shock, horror. Noel Gallagher's favourite album is not Sgt. Pepper's. It's actually Nevermind the Bollocks. People are like, no, you're joking. It's obvious. Listen to Bring It On Down. It's punk rock. So the initial idea is, as it turned out, it almost looks like a font. It's like it's beautifully handwritten. My initial idea was like a scribble thing, but it just didn't work, you know. And it's not just one part. I mean, just yesterday even, somebody text me or contact me, can you write Live Forever? Because I want it tattooed on my arm. I get it all the time. So much so I've saved the file so I can just email them out to people. Another one, just yesterday I did this. My son's called Arthur. Can you write his name? And I'll have it tattooed on me in your handwriting. Yeah, of course. And which you won't pay nothing, just buy some off the website. So that's how that came about. It was kind of I mean, I'm massively influenced by punk. That's where I came from. That's what it's all about. And it was a kind of a nod to that. I just didn't think that a set type would work. And it's there forever now, isn't it? And that's just what it looks like. And it just happens to be my handwriting. We still work the same way now. It's a very small outfit, is Microdot. It always has been. People couldn't believe it when we were based in London in the 90s. They imagined it to be like 500 of us over 10 floors or something. No, it's just half a dozen of us. And the way I work it, I know you should never employ your mates. Well, I couldn't employ anybody else. Not because they're my mates, but we don't. It's not like work where we work. Do you know what I mean? It's just like in here now, just hanging out, and you know, we get a lot done and what have you. And I applied that same mentality to extras that we use in all the shoots, rather than, not that it was never a budget thing. We didn't do it to save money. I mean, they had plenty of money for that. But I just think if you get somebody in who's like a professional model or an actor, that's what you get. You get a wooden person who you've just got to mould that day. Whereas if it's my mum and dad, you know, it's just a different vibe, isn't it? You know, and it was always my mum and dad and friends. So they weren't some sort of jaded guy who's just, this is his third shoot this week. Everybody's dead excited, you know, and that comes across as well. And so that was basically it. It was nothing to do with saving money because we had plenty of money to throw at anything like that. It was all about, I suppose you can't even tell it. It's just about enjoying your work. And I'd rather work with friends and family than people I don't know who might turn out to be like, you know what I mean? That was basically it. We were like, it really was an eye of the hurricane situation. You know, it was chaos, it was madness. They were the biggest thing in the world, but it was just still us lot in this little room talking about what we're going to do next, or just go for a pint, or, you know, it really was, I'm not being blasé about it because I realised I was in an incredibly privileged position. And, you know, people would have cut their arm off to have been there. So I'm not just saying, it was nothing. But I never really got that obsessed with thinking, you know, it was just the here and the be here now. That's what it was all about, you know, be here now. It's amazing. Never mind what's coming next. This is amazing. Because it was incredible, you know, truly incredible. You didn't have time to think about the future. The now was amazing. You know, that's where it was at. The Wonderwall, there's another one that's based on a fine art painting, the work of the Belgian surrealist René Magritte. He'd do a series of pictures where it was like a painting of what was outside the window, so you look it up, they're amazing. Another one I saw of his the other day, he was doing like, you know, an artist when he's painting somebody will be looking at the subject and then painting it. There's a picture of a bird, but he's looking at an egg, you know, just, I thought, very Microdot, but he beat us to it by 100 years. So Wonderwall was based on the work of René Magritte, and it was initially going to be Liam Gallagher through the frame. And obviously, everything would have to be run by Noel. And at that time, that meant, because this was pre-internet, faxing the ideas to, you might have seen the Do You Know What I Mean video, it's all done by fax. And I faxed the ideas to Ignition Management in London. And this is just so 90s. This couldn't happen now. So I said, if everything's cool, we'll just get on with it. I didn't hear nothing back. Everything's cool, isn't it? So we got on with it. What I didn't know was the fax machine was out of paper, so he never got the message. So we're up on Primrose Hill shooting it, me holding the frame, Liam through the frame, and then just completely out of the blue, I hear this maniac shouting out of a taxi going past me. Oh, what the fucking hell's going on here? Stop. What is this? There's no Gallagher driving past in a taxi, purely by, Creation Records was around the corner, but even still. I'm like, what? He says, what are you doing? What are we doing? We're doing the Sleep of Wonderwall. What with him? Not with him in it, And this is what it was like. And I said, I sent you the facts. I never saw that. It's got to be a girl. It has to be a girl. Sort it out, Brian. So then we sort of, all right, fair enough, stopped it. And I think he was right in the end, And the girl that we used was Anita Herriot, who worked at Creation. So we went down to the record company, and I thought Anita looked right. And we did some test shots of her in a pub called the Pembroke Castle on the corner. And that was it. We just did it again with her in the sleeve. So that was a pretty quick one. Don't Look Back in Anger, on the other hand, took considerably longer, obviously. I get a lot of Beatles references in there, just because I was a Beatles fan, not because Oasis were trying to mimic the Beatles, If you're really into something and you think something's brilliant, I think being influenced by that is fair enough. You're not ripping it off, it's a nod too, isn't it? And in that case, I think toward the end of the Beatles, Ringo had left. And when he came back, George had smothered his drum kit in flowers as a welcome back sort of vibe. And it was based on that idea, and we had 10,000 carnations flown in from Holland. That budget, it was just nuts by this point. And it gets even more mental because you don't get blue carnations and they're all red, white and blue, right? So I had a work experience student did 3,000 white carnations in blue ink that morning for the shoot. And it's all their gear as well, it is all Oasis's equipment that we had the crew bring down and set up. So that was a full day of a job, just tweaking a still life. Oh yeah, we didn't do anything in Photoshop. That sort of style started. Once I'd left college and I was kind of struggling to find a style, and I think, you've got to have a style. But you can't work too hard at it. It's got to come naturally, otherwise it's just not right, is it? And it was with the Rap Assassins that I first developed that, and a single called Less Mellow, which is a record on fire. And that was that photographically based narrative style. But the reason why there was no Photoshop wasn't me being a purist. I just couldn't afford a computer, because for the reasons I said earlier, in the early 90s, I'm sure Mac-based Photoshop did exist, but you're talking tens of thousands. It's like any new technology. When it first comes out, it's mad expensive, isn't it? And then it drops, and then everybody can afford it. But it wasn't until 96 we actually got a computer. So definitely maybe it was pasted up in my bedroom onto boards to be, Nothing done digitally. And there was tiny little bits of, you won't notice this either. If you look on the cover of Be Here Now, the telly that's at the far end of the pool, on that TV screen is the whole of the sleeve of Be Here Now. Next time you look at it, have a look. The whole of the screen, and that's a nod to Ummagumma by Pink Floyd, which is my favourite sleeve of all time. So there was tiny little bits of Photoshop, but we certainly didn't Photoshop the car in. And I think it's obvious because had I Photoshopped in, I'd have made it look, I think it looks too small. It looks Photoshopped because the car looks too small. So the non-Photoshop thing was done out of necessity because I couldn't afford a computer, but ultimately that became our sort of trademark. And it's just more fun, isn't it? Who wouldn't want to put a Rolls Royce in a swimming pool and have somebody else pay for it, and get paid for doing it? We used to knock ideas around between us, I'd say, what can we do that's just a bit different? We're getting more and more budget now. When you think about it, cigarettes and alcohol, that was super early doors, that. There wouldn't have been massive amounts of money for that. But, I was always on the lookout for just different things, different ideas, what we could do. And we had a great working relationship. And, I think it was born out of the fact I was asking for something different as opposed to, right, okay, next one, let's do it. You know what I mean? Just like it wasn't a production line. Everyone, like I said earlier, was like a bespoke suit tailored specifically to that release. That's what set us apart. We just thought about it more. set off when I was 11 to design killer record sleeves for the biggest bands in the world, and bearing in mind I was just a working class kid from Wigan with no contacts, no money, no experience, no nothing. To actually pull that off, I think is quite remarkable, and that's something I'm really proud of, you know. I'm an all-in kind of guy. If I'm doing it, I'm doing it, you know. And I can't just do it half-baked, which means I've got to stop what else I'm doing. So ultimately, it does boil down to money. Unless, I mean, I would do it if there's some band that I just thought these lot are just so incredibly amazing that I have to be involved. But how often does that happen? You know, and it's happened to me twice in the Verve and Oasis. So to happen again would be quite a coincidence, wouldn't it? But who knows? Yeah, it's all about how good they are. But you know, with the greatest respect to most of the bands who contact me, it becomes a financial thing then. If you want me to down tools at the boutique or the online situation or brand Microdot, which is effectively what we're trying to develop, you know, you're going to have to pay me X, Y, Z, thousands of pounds or whatever it might be. And I don't want to come across as a mercenary, but unless I think you're the next greatest thing that's going to happen, it does become a financial thing, doesn't it? You know. So I have done recently, you know, I did the album for the band Deja Vega from Cheshire, who I think are amazing. Again, you know, I got nothing for that. A couple of £100, that was just a nominal fee. But yeah, so I do occasionally do it if I believe in the project. I just very rarely come across a project that I believe in enough to want to do it. And you know, again, this isn't just because I was involved. Oasis were primarily a 90s phenomenon, wasn't it? Whatever happened thereafter wasn't quite the same. Bonehead, I mean, my dad, he's no longer with us, he was 90 when he passed away a couple of years back. But even he said it all ended when Bonehead left. And I think, you know, Bonehead left, Wigsy left, Owen Morris stopped doing the production, and they changed my logo. All happened at the same time. You know, people often say to me, how come they stopped using you? Well, it wasn't that they just stopped using me. It was all changed at the office, all at the same time, wasn't it? You know, half the band left. Owen Morris, cannot stress enough how big a part of the project he was. Literally, stopped using my artwork. Noel wasn't even writing all the songs anymore. So, you know, it's not like they just got shut of me and off they went. Everything changed. And, you know, for the better or for the worse, I'll let the public decide. But, you know, I've not heard many people who think it was better after the artwork was better after we did it. Not that I'm going to slag anybody off, but, you know, the Microdot sleeve, you know, people who say to me, they actually refer to it as the Microdot era of artwork, you know, and it was basically everything that was released in the 90s. Yeah, very proud of that body of work. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, the Microdot Boutique is our physical shop, which, you know, sells my work and occasionally the work of other photographers as well. Anthony Harrison, who we work with as well. But it's primarily my work, and going forward, we're going to be developing, like I said earlier, brand. I mean, I've got this idea of like a Supreme situation where we'll be selling crowbars with Microdot written on them, you know. Stuff. I think that's amazing, to be honest. But I'm not a massive Supreme fan, but I think anybody can get away with selling a crowbar with the branding on it. It's just brilliant. And what it is, this started in 2019 because we had an opportunity. We had a bit of space in Kendal that was tiny little. Well, this all started in 2015 when I did a 25 years of Microdot exhibition. And the response was just phenomenal. And from there, we did another one, a big exhibition in Leeds. Again, amazing. Then after that, we just started doing little pop-up shops. And every time we did it, we just got an incredible response. Then we had this chance of taking over this permanently a tiny little shop in Kendal, which became the Microdot Boutique itself. Then that expanded, and then it's just gone bananas now. I mean, we're in this, have you seen the pictures? I mean, it's this huge gallery, and I've got a studio in there, and, you know, it's on an industrial estate, right? That shows the confidence of the brand, to be honest, that, you know, we don't need to be on the high street. Nine out of every 10 people who come in the shop are not from Kendal, from Glasgow or Newcastle or Manchester. They've all driven to get to us. So why be in the city town centre? You park right outside, and, you know, it's an immersive experience. It's not like being in a shop. You know, you can hang out there all day if you want. You know, when we encourage people to do that and take as many pictures as they want and buy stuff that they don't need. The YouTube channel, the Microdot YouTube channel, which I spotted that YouTube was the way forward, literally in 2010, right? And I thought, this is it. This is the way forward. It took me 5 years to set up the channel, and then a further 7 years to do a video, right? And that first video, I started it when the first lockdown began, and I finally finished it 16 months later. So I was literally spending a year moving a light around. I mean, I'm not joking either. Jill will tell you, it was driving us nuts. But now I've kind of got it, and I'm off and running now. And the whole point of it is, I think it was some like Absolute Radio, one of these on, these digital radio stations that on their social media, they had a picture, some might say, pointing out what all the bits meant. And in the comment section beneath it, it was like, no way, I didn't. And I just thought, what? I thought everybody knew all this. So that's where it started from. I thought, well, okay, I'll do a real deep dive into each one. The 20-minute videos as well, which is for YouTube quite a long. But all I do is watch YouTube videos, right? So all the bits that you see that I've nicked from other YouTube videos, like, the bit where I use my phone to zoom in. I collect wristwatches, so that's an idea I saw from a guy on the wristwatch channel. He's using it. I thought, wow, that's a great little technique. So all the best bits of YouTube channels that I watch, I put into ours. And the plan is to do, because it's all about regular content to get an audience going into it. I'd like to be doing one a week, but bearing in mind we're such a small team and there's me doing it with Jill and Lee, who's just come on board, that's where we're at the minute. I'd like the next person we employ to be dedicated social media bod, making and editing the videos, and then thereafter employ more people to pack the orders that will come on the back of it. But it's just, I come at this whole thing from a fan's point of view. And if I was a fan of Oasis, I would find it interesting to have all this, because there's so much to it that people don't realise the behind the scenes. And like you said, you didn't even realise it was Liam Gallagher on the bridge. Stuff that I think is blatantly obvious, people don't realise. So there's tons of them. I'm doing one this week on how to differentiate a genuine Creation Records street fly poster from a reprint, or the possibilities are endless. So that's what I enjoy doing it, and people seem to like them. I'm here at King Tut's today primarily to measure the stage up. I'm doing it's like Elton John at Madison Square Gardens. We've got three shows at King Tut's, and what it is me just taking on the road up to Glasgow here. The story of Microdot, the incredible story, like I said earlier, of how this working class lad from Wigan, who inspired by the Sex Pistols and Buzzcocks in the late 70s, thought, I want to get involved with this. And actually pulled it off and ended up working with all these amazing bands. So it's a story of how we did that. And what we're going to do is we're going to recreate on this very stage a small section of the Microdot boutique, even to the colour scheme, and have art all displayed here, and have a pop-up shop. And I think the first one's sold out. It's the Saturday afternoon, the 2nd of July, and the Saturday evening. And tickets can be bought from a link in the description below this video, I guess. So yeah, it'd be wonderful to see you all here.